my family has this worldview. We are a faithful family. This is what we teach our children. We send them to school, and school is trying to undo everything that you've taught them in the foundation. And that's where it becomes unacceptable.
Outstanding is a production of The Washington Stand, your source for news and commentary from a biblical worldview.
Welcome to the Outstanding Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Harper. On this show, we dive into topics from news, culture, politics, and more from a biblical perspective. And that brings me to the question for today. Have you been labeled a hater yet? Maybe it's only a matter of time. Jesus said, "Blessed are you when you are persecuted for righteousness' sake." And it seems like more and more people these days are being called haters, hate groups, all the like. Well, our guest today, Tina Descovich, she founded Moms for Liberty. They have an army of women fighting at the grassroots level against the leftist agenda in schools, in government, really around the country. And of course, you might have guessed it, her group was recently labeled a hate group, whatever that means now. I think it means nothing, personally. It sounds like nonsense. But we're, of course, going to talk about that in a moment. But first, Tina, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. I love to come on and talk, prove how hateful we are not.
There you go. Well, that's good. I think it'll be evident by the end of the conversation. You have a really interesting story, though. You're of course a mom, Moms for Liberty, and you were on a school board for, I think, about 4 years, including during the beginning of COVID, right? And then you had to deal with the fallout around COVID policies, which was a headache for everyone, not exclusive to you guys, of course. And then I think my understanding is Moms for Liberty really got started during that COVID fight, taking on COVID policies. Can you give us an idea of, what is Moms for Liberty for those who are less familiar, and what are some of the big battles that you were taking on, present day?
So we are a national nonprofit organization. We're a 501c4, which is a little different than a 3. It allows us to do some activism and get involved in school board elections and other things. So, as you said, I served from 2016 to 2020 on a school board. And my term ended in November of 2020. And by January 1st, 2021, a few school board members, we all got together and decided we want to start an organization to help parents. Our mission statement is to defend parental rights at all levels of government. We wanted to use the experiences we had serving on a school board, seeing school districts and state legislatures and the federal government at that point, stepping all over the rights of parents to make decisions for their children, whether it be in education or their medical health. The government was taking away these God-given rights. And so we thought we'd start this organization. I wrote a 5-year business plan, and it said that after 5 years, we'd be in all 67 counties in Florida. And here we are, almost 5 years later. We're in 48 states. We have 320 chapters across those states. A chapter's a county. And we have 130,000 active moms and dads on the ground. And some of the things we do is we kind of are the watchdogs of school boards. We review school board agendas. We show up at school board meetings and advocate for a better education for our children. And we defend parental rights. We get involved at the state legislature level. And now with the new administration, we're actually in Washington, D.C. quite a bit, working on ed policy at the federal level.
Wow, Tina, I can already just feel the hate seething off of you. It's just coming through the screens, palpable. Of course, I'm joking. The reason I make that joke, though, is because I thank you for the background. It's hard for me to reconcile what you just said with the news that came out of Massachusetts recently, where police labeled your group a hate group. They were basically treating you like some kind of violent terrorist organization in their training materials. Is that right? How in the world did that happen?
Well, you have to go back to the Wayback Machine to 2023 when Southern Poverty Law Center added us to their hate map and said we were an anti-government extremist group, is what they labeled us.
Yeah, they do that to us. They did it to focus on the family. I think there's a lemonade stand down the street that got the label as well. So you're not alone.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt if just some sweet little kids selling lemonade have made the hate map too. I mean, we joke, but it's a serious matter. We know that their lives have been threatened for being on that hate map. We've been canceled time and time again for being on that list and hate map. Our chapters sometimes they call locations and entities to have events and they say, no, sorry, you're a hate group. And what you just brought up is one of the more extreme cases where the entire state of Massachusetts police force is being trained to be on the lookout for Moms for Liberty members because we are a hate group, and we are categorized in their training and in their training manual right next to Antifa, who has burned down, whole parts of cities and set cars on fire, and right after the neo-Nazis. And one of these things does not belong, and that is Moms for Liberty.
Yeah, well, this is kind of continuing a trend that was very prevalent in the Biden administration of labeling, they famously had this memo that went around talking about parents, like investigating parents, calling parents terrorists or part of a hate group, and demonizing parents who wanted to get involved, who are questioning COVID policies. And we see this all the time. I'm not sure what to make of it, but I think it goes back to that persecution thing and silencing and censorship, which is really powerful in the last decade and has lost a lot of its relevance. But the left in particular tries to take all groups on the right and bunch them together with some kind of like discredited, ridiculous neo-Nazi groups as a way to silence them, to cancel them and write them off. But I get the feeling that it's not really working anymore. Like SPLC and other groups have kind of been discredited, like not taken nearly as seriously anymore. Is that your sense that despite all the labels and the efforts to censor you, it's much less powerful than it was a few years ago?
I think it's less powerful with people that are conservative or on the right or know better, but I would say most people don't. They hear that we're a hate group. The entire state of Massachusetts police force is being trained that we're a hate group. And so it's still very dangerous. It still carries a weight that is causing, negative reactions and actions to our organization. And so I think we still do have to take it very seriously.
Did the Massachusetts police ever renege on that or mediate it or temper it at all? Or are they just kind of sticking to their guns?
No, we keep asking for a public apology. We have not been contacted at all, and we have not received an apology. And they have no desire to take it out of their training. As a matter of fact, I think either NPR or PBS ran a story recently where they quoted 7 or 8 different people throughout the state and in leadership positions that said we belong on that list, and they're thankful that police are being trained to, be warned about us.
Yeah, I mean, we've had our own run-ins with SPLC, and we have a great podcast that Jared Bridges did with a couple other folks on SPLC specifically. So if you're listening and you don't know about Southern Poverty Law Center and you want to learn about it, go back and listen to that podcast. It really exposes what's going on and how ridiculous some of these claims are. But I think Tina, the reason you're being targeted is because they're afraid of you. Because when I hear, I think you said, 130,000 parents, is that right? 48 states. Right.
Yeah, you absolutely got it. And, you were going back to the Biden administration and the DOJ and the threat tag. The FBI was calling some of our moms after school board meetings, but it didn't work. It didn't slow us down. And so I feel like if you look at the whole time period from the time we launched until probably the end of last year, the systematic attacks that were coming after us, and when one thing didn't work, a new level of attack was unleashed on us. And so the DOJ didn't work, the FBI didn't work. And so, we move all the way into 2023 and through public records requests and some other things. And the Heritage Foundation actually had to sue to get some of these requests on our behalf. We found out that the head of the SPLC visited the Biden White House 6 times leading up to declaring us an anti-government extremist group. And so you can see the collusion and the way they were all working together. Shortly after that, somebody invested millions into Anonymous to cyber attack us relentlessly for like 2 months at a time, over a 2-month period. It was just unrelenting attacks that just kept coming after us. But we're moms. We just brush ourselves off. Nothing's going to stop us from fighting for our kids. So we smile, we get back up, we put a smile on our face, we dust off our knees like we tell our kids, and we just get back in the fight.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get 4 kids to church on time, what is a ransomware attack really? I don't know. There's no.
I don't know. My kids are mostly grown. My youngest is 17, but we were in church on Sunday, and you watch those with more kids than not. Like they're the ones shuffling in after the opening song has started. Yes. Some after the prayer, and you just, that's just so cute. Some every now and then we're in Florida, so every now and then you get one that doesn't have shoes on, mm-hmm. and the littlest one, and you're like, thank heavens that mom just, she's probably like, just get in the car, let's go.
I'm well aware. I'm in that world now. I mean, you almost lose your salvation on the way there. So if you have to go straight to church because you have to get refilled up. I want to get a little clarity, because I think someone listening would say, okay, 130,000 moms and dads they can't all be hate groups, radicals, extremists, but they've got this label for a reason. So to be clear, during COVID, your supposed crime was having parents stand up and say, hey, we don't like these lockdowns. We don't believe in this. We want to make a difference, which, by the way, actually appealed to a lot of people on the left and the middle and turned a lot of people against the Democratic Party. And then maybe some of the other things that you've taken strong stances on would be certain books in libraries or very biased curriculum. Can you explain some of those issues you've taken on?
Yeah, it did start with getting schools open. Moms wanted schools open and saw the dangers of keeping them closed. I was a school board member, and all I could think of was our underserved students. Public schools play a really big role in the community, and shutting them down with no preparation or planning for these students was going to be a problem. I knew about learning gains or learning gaps and underserved students, and what having school closed even for 2 to 3 weeks could do to a child, and especially at a time like second or third grade where they're trying to learn to read and possibly struggling. And so all of these things played into why moms like me all across the country were standing up. And then you had the teachers union trying to keep schools closed, like in Los Angeles, 2 years in, and they said, we won't let you open schools until you defund the police. And so the battle really was on between, I'd say, the teachers union, the Democrat Party, the Biden administration, and moms, or like late in 2020, definitely through 2021. And so we were declared the enemy right out the gate because everyone was taking their corners on these issues. And so no matter what we stood up for at that point, it was deemed bad. And so, we moved to wanting masks off our children, wanting children not to be quarantined for being healthy through the COVID stages. And then moms started seeing what was being streamed into their living rooms and into their kitchen tables when kids were doing virtual schools. And let's just say they weren't too impressed, either at the lack of teaching, the lack of solid curriculum, or they were horrified by some of the things that actually were being taught. And so that was the obvious next move for them to show up at school board meetings and hold these leaders accountable. And they absolutely did not like that. And so we were the enemy there. We just started getting too powerful and making too many waves against an education establishment that's had a stranglehold on education for decades and decades. And, they're powerful, billions of dollars, the teachers unions, and we were really starting to put some holes in their armor, and they did not like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what makes you guys so dangerous. Is this the clearest opposition to teachers unions I've seen in a long time? And you're still growing. You're growing very fast. I mean, they have a lot of money and they're very entrenched. They have a lot of political lobbying and power, but you have a lot of voices and you're already in nearly all 50 states. And so it is a real threat. There was a wave of authoritarianism that swept over the whole nation, and anyone who spoke up about it was labeled a threat, a danger. You wanted people to die. You hated kids. I mean, crazy things where you were accused of. And now later, the science comes out that kids were pretty much COVID was a threat to basically almost no kids. That the cloth masks were a joke and didn't do anything. By the way, disinfecting surfaces actually didn't do anything hardly to stop COVID. There was a lot of things that we were told must be done that it just kind of was all debunked later by the science. And if you question that at the time, of course, you were labeled as you guys experienced. Present day, you talked about some of the things being taught in the classroom, and we've talked about that on this podcast. I've been amazed, as I've covered as a journalist for years now, the things that are being taught, the grants that are being given for things like critical race theory at the K through 12 level. I've been amazed at how often people just straight up tell me that's not happening. They don't say, oh, well, here's why it's actually good. It's not a problem. They just look you right in the face and they tell you, no, that's not happening. You're misinformed. You're a conspiracy theorist. But I'm looking at the federal grant that I reported on that gives money to teach K through 12 teachers how to implement CRT in the classrooms or whatever it is, or other things I've reported on. Have you run into that same problem where you're fighting things, you're simultaneously being told that this isn't a problem, but also just be quiet and stop talking about it because you're a bigot for raising the question?
Yeah, early on in CNN, I think it was in 2021, CNN came here to the office and interviewed Tiffany and I, my co-founder. And I remember her saying, like, oh, CRT is not being taught in school. And we said, oh, yes, it is. And she said, right. Where? And I was like, Mecklenburg, North Carolina. Like, we've got a video this week of a mom reading the assignment at a school board meeting. We could list out 5 or 6 places. And so that was just off the top of my head, not to mention everything that we, was sent into us if I would have had it all in front of me for the interview. And so it's been like that with everything we have done. That doesn't exist. You're making it up. And it's still like that. You could see things we post on social media sometimes, and there's always comments like, you're lying, you're making this up, it doesn't exist. And so, I don't even know how to argue back with people when you show them the proof and they say it doesn't exist.
Yeah, it's a weird phenomenon I've experienced on this issue. It doesn't exist. You provide facts and they say, why do you care so much? So that's the next step. It doesn't exist. And then, okay, well, why do you care so much? And then if you say, well, here's a good reason why I care, then it's like, well, you're a racist or something.
I was going to say, that
you're
they bring you through the journey, and they always end with a name calling to shut you down. Well, you're a racist, you're a bigot. And then you're like, oh, nuh-uh, no, I'm not. Nuh-uh. You got nothing left.
Right. Well, we've talked about how tough moms are, and now we're talking about the pushback you get from as high up as CNN or a once credible institution or your local school board. I wonder, these moms in particular, you've got tens of thousands of them who are willing to take this criticism. I saw in another interview that you talked about the importance of tenacity and how you felt that was core to what your moms have as a core value for your group. How important is that tenacity? Because I don't think moms are busy and they're trying to be nice and kind people. And my general sense is they have like a lot of other things to do rather than have to take this on, but they feel compelled, like they've been forced to take on this issue. What do you think about that tenacity and where does it come from?
I like that you said forced to take on the issue. I open up my podcast every week where I showcase one of our moms that's in the front line of the culture war, I say. And I always say they've been forced to fight in this culture war. No moms want to do this. There's a million other things we'd rather be doing. Taking care of our kids and our family, doing, volunteering in the classroom. It's way more fun than showing up at a school board meeting and sitting there for 4 hours to speak and for them to shut off your mic or throw you out and not listen. And so, America, or those that in America that are against us or started calling us haters and tried to shut us down, if they just would have paused for a minute and said, why are all these moms coming out to school board meetings? There's got to be something going on, instead of just saying it's not happening, you're lying, you're making it up, we're going to shut your mic off. This could have gone a whole nother direction. And, Moms for Liberty wouldn't even exist if our elected officials would have listened and taken action and done what they were supposed to do, which would be fine with me. I love this organization, but good grief, the fact that it has to exist it's very disappointing, actually.
Yeah, it has big political implications too. I think it's interesting, and I think COVID radicalized a lot of moms to go a certain way politically, because traditional political wisdom is that suburban moms are a vote that's up for grabs, and they are a coveted swing state vote. You reach out, you run ads for suburban women because they might vote Republican or Democrat in a given election. It's not as if these moms are just a hard right wing of the Republican Party, and it's always been that way. They really haven't. And so I'm curious if you have a lot of moms who say, I used to be a Democrat, or I used to consider myself a liberal, and I'm not even saying I'm a Republican now, but I can't go along with what they're doing. They've become a moderate, and they've been changed because of what they're seeing through COVID and through what their kids are being taught.
You're 100% correct. Again, my weekly podcast, I always ask them, we get into this, who were you and how did your journey and how you got here? And I think we've had 17 episodes so far, and 14 or 15 of those moms that all voted for Obama.
Right.
And so it's just been remarkable to see their journey. A couple of them didn't vote for President Trump in 2016. In 2016. And so it's just interesting to watch their journey and see how they've been pushed to the right when they're really not even ideological people. Like they've never been political before. They've been forced by radical Democrats to take a stand. They've been pushed over to the right when they don't even know if they belong there or think they belong there. And so, Jennifer Say, she's an independent now, but she's been a Democrat her whole life, raised a Democrat in San Francisco. And she said, now I'm considered a radical Republican. I'm an independent. I'm not radical anything. I just don't think boys should be in women's sports. And so the Democrats are playing a dangerous game by taking their most loyal, dedicated believers and giving them nowhere to go but the right.
Yeah, and I think, there's a lot of issues that, for instance, Trump is pretty strong on that same demographic has not always been as favorable to, like mass deportations or something, that you could have seen the same demographics say, you know what, I'm not going to go for mass deportations. But that issue is just not nearly as important to them as, their kids being forced to be in a locker room or something, or being taught, forced to read a book about how America's racist, and that's the beginning and end of our country's story. So
Yeah, 80%, all the polling shows 80% of Americans agree with us on all of the major issues we've been fighting. And so when, we didn't have enough money to do any polling until recently. And so we didn't even know. You just did it because it was right. And then to see the numbers come back in some of the polling, it's really quite remarkable. And it clears some things up, because you wonder how many people hate you out there. But to know that 80% are firmly in agreement with us, it feels pretty good.
So how do moms get involved with you? I mean, they're listening. You've gotten a lot. And what is the level of involvement expected? If I'm a Moms for Liberty dad, am I going to meetings? Am I going to school board meetings? Am I holding a sign and picketing? What does it look like to be a Moms for Liberty dad? I just learned you have dads today. So.
Yeah, absolutely. We have dads. We have dad shirts. We have a few different versions of our dad shirts. And so some of our chapters actually have formed offshoot dad clubs. They've called them Founding Fathers clubs, and they're the dads from the Moms for Liberty chapter. And so it looks different everywhere. We're very locally controlled, locally driven, and so chapters can do pretty much whatever they want in the vicinity of our mission statement. So and we try to plug people in with what they are good at and what they want to do. If you want to hold a sign on a street corner, we've got some signs for you. We hope that you'll be looking at school board agendas and attending school board meetings when issues come up that you are concerned about. There's a variety of things, and so you can go to momsforliberty.org. You can sign up to just be a national member, which is kind of a little bit more laissez-faire. You're following what's going on. You're plugged in. There's some national calls to action we ask for, where you have to send an email. That's the easy way, the easy member version. And then you can join your local chapter also from our website, or you could start a chapter if there's not one in your community. Once you join a chapter, you're getting a little bit more engaged. Hopefully you're going to attend your monthly chapter meetings and make sure you're plugged into what your local school district is doing. And you're paying attention to ed policy in your state and parental rights policy in your state. And so, again, a million different things. We take all skills, all talents, and we will put you to work.
Yeah, that's very interesting. How's this different from the PTA? Has the PTA just been kind of captured, or how do you see your relationship to the PTA? And shouldn't they kind of be doing these kinds of things?
No, actually, it's a great question. So there's the PTA and there's PTOs. I'm not sure how familiar you're familiar with this.
Please explain it to me.
Okay, the PTA is a national organization, Parent Teachers Association. It's actually been hijacked by the woke mob, as you can imagine. They have lobbyists in all the states. They have federal lobbyists, and they have signed on.
So not
to
much
all
local control in the PTA.
Yeah, not at all. And so when they're local in your school, sometimes the moms don't really know, and they know they're volunteering in the classroom and doing some things of that nature for the school, but they pay dues that feeds up to the state and the national organization, and that money is being used to advance woke ideologies. The huge supporters of critical race theory, huge supporters of the LGBTQ indoctrination and curriculum and books and keeping secrets from parents, all of the things we've been fighting against. So the PTA as an organization is not our friend. The PTOs are parent-teacher organizations. Those are independent. There's no close connection, no national organization for PTOs. They support the individual school. Much safer bet, in my opinion. And they do things like raise money for the school for playground equipment or extra things for the teachers. They support the school. They volunteer in the classrooms. And so Moms for Liberty is a little bit more focused on the ed policy at the school district level, the policies that are driving the laws of the school district, for example. But we also do things like book drives and support teachers and do things of that nature too.
You've mentioned a couple times these books, and I think I've mentioned these books in the libraries. I've read a little bit about these and written a little bit about them. You cannot overestimate how ridiculous or obscene some of these books in the libraries where second graders go are. Can you give us some examples of what we're talking about when we are talking about, getting books out of libraries?
Well, I don't have them with me. I would show you. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's allowed, where this is going to run. Most of them are so bad that you can't show them on TV or on the news. They have to blur out the pictures. The language is horrific. I don't want to say any of those words on your show,
Right.
so I'm going to allude to some things.
Sure.
Genderqueer, for example, was found here in my Red County on display in a junior high school library. It has children performing sex. It has depictions, like cartoon depictions of children performing sexual acts on each other. Um, it's so hard to discuss
Right.
some of these
No, I
things.
know.
There's obviously, there's rape, there's incest, there's in very graphic ways in some of these books. um All Boys Aren't Blue, his uncle rapes him. That was found in an elementary school in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. The author came after me and said I was lying. I had to go find proof to show him, and he still didn't believe me. And so even the author said, well, at some point, that's, it's a young adult book, which in my opinion shouldn't be even in middle schools or high schools for that matter. But local communities get to decide, but it absolutely shouldn't be in elementary schools. And so how these books have been getting through and showing up in schools is beyond my comprehension. But I think America's starting to wake up to it and do a good job of trying to keep this porn out of kids' hands.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy that we have to bleep what you're saying to run it on YouTube, but it's going to be in the kids library. I mean, that's
Yeah.
where we're at. And obviously we're a faith-based show and podcast, and people like me are lectured ad nauseum about how we can't have religion in schools, and you dare put 10 commandments in, within 100 foot of a school building, and there's all these things, and I sort of get some of the arguments. I think I don't agree with most of them, but when you lectured ad nauseum about the dangers of having, moral curriculum or curriculum based in the Bible or any kind of religious tradition, which our entire country and Western civilization was founded on, and we are the fruit of it and all whatever. But then they turn around and push just a different kind of religion through these. It's the LGBT religion. It is, propaganda in the CRT. I don't really love the word woke, but it really is that. And so it seems to me, I'm just curious if you think, it feels like there's a religious zeal because the teachers unions and these other groups, they're taking political capital away from fighting for better wages or other very tangible things to push for a certain kind of curriculum. And there's kind of a religious devotion. We must train up and disciple the kids and the next generation in this kind of liberal philosophy. And they see it as almost like a spiritual calling or an obligation they have for the good of society or something.
Yeah, they're trying to change their worldview. And for
Yes.
those that are raising their children and creating their homes on Judeo-Christian values, or you're raising your child Christian, you have a biblical worldview. And so you have opposing forces now trying to give them a different worldview, which is, cultural Marxism, if you want to dig into that, but it's void of religion. And it's not just void of religion, it's anti-faith, anti-religion. And so it's painful. It's painful to watch. And it's not okay. It's just, it's just not okay. I don't know. We can get into all the names and the titles of all the things, but often on shows, I don't really want to dig into that because you lose people when you call it certain things or certain names. So I think you can just simplify it and say, my family has this worldview. We are a faithful family. This is what we teach our children. We send them to school, and school is trying to undo everything that you've taught them in the foundation. And that's where it becomes unacceptable.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point, and we're kind of wrapping up here. But I want to ask you before we go. You're in Florida still, correct? This is where you got started, yeah.
Yeah.
And you were Florida Governor Ron DeSantis appointed you, and then he reappointed you to the Florida Commission on Ethics. What does that mean, and what is going on in Florida? Florida's been ground zero for a lot of these education fights.
Yeah, the Florida Commission on Ethics, I assumed every state had a commission on ethics, but that's not true. Florida has had one for 50 years. We turned 50 years old last year, I think. And they take all the cases of all the elected officials being accused of using their position for inappropriately, whether it be to get political monetary gain or get some kind of advantage. And so sometimes most of the time it's not necessarily violating laws, but it's definitely violating the code of ethics in the state of Florida. And so it's really quite a remarkable experience to serve on the Ethics Commission. I think I served for almost 2 years. I'm currently not on the Ethics Commission, and if you want to dig into that, it's a whole nother story. But the Senate didn't just not confirm me; they refused to take up my name here in the state of Florida. I got caught in this political battle between our legislature and our governor, and
you were reappointed in February, right? And then they kind of
I've been reappointed a few times. I don't even know the dates of it all. So the governor has the authority if it's if they're not in session, he has the authority to reappoint. And so he reappointed me 2 or 3 times, and the Senate refused to take up my name. So I am no longer on the Ethics Commission, but I served almost 2 years. It really was an enjoyable experience for me. I loved having those philosophical discussions about where these ethical lines are at the state level. And I really just want to commend Florida for having an ethics commission. They take their jobs very seriously at the state level, and I urge every state to get one in place.
Hey, ethics. We're pro-ethics. What an idea. Ethics in government. We should start trying that nationwide. Tina, thank you so much. Moms for Liberty. This has been a great conversation. I think it's eye-opening. I think we scratched the surface on a lot of things that are going on at your school. If you think it's not happening at your school, in your school district, it's probably because you haven't looked into it. That's my sense. As you hear about, we're talking over 130,000 moms and dads. They're there for a reason. They're in all these states for a reason. It's not just happening in San Francisco and Manhattan. It's happening around the country. It's happening in red states, in red counties, and Trump voting counties. There's no one is safe from this kind of ideology. It's everywhere. And so this is a really important topic to talk about. And thank you for listening. Thanks for tuning into this episode. This is the Outstanding Podcast. Like I said, I'm your host, Casey Harper. Please like, subscribe, follow, and share this on social media and with your friends. Tina, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks. It's been a great conversation.
Outstanding is a production of The Washington Stand, your source for news and commentary from a biblical worldview. This podcast is made in the USA by producer Casey Harper, production assistant Rachel Woods, technical producers David Salkeld and Yusuf Fletcher, and executive producer Jared Bridges. Help support us by texting the word outstanding to 67742 and read more at washingtonstand.com.